to proceed to now is the Port of Taharoa and Derelict Vessel Management Workshop. And as mentioned earlier, we've got Graham Naylor, our independent chair of our Risk and Assurance Committee, here to listen along. Right. Brent, opening comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for coming along, Graham. So this, the next two items are risk-related matters that we want to bring. Risk-related matters that we want to bring to your attention. We had intended to bring these matters through the Risk and Audit Committee, but timing meant that it wasn't going to happen, and so it's important that we bring it to the council in a workshop forum, and it's great that Graham's able to be here. So the two risk-related matters, one, Port of Taharoa. We've spoken before about how this is a bit of a past that came from Maritime New Zealand, and we wanted to come before you to make sure that you're aware of the risks that are associated with that, but also the work that the team have been doing so that we are going to be in a good position to take on that function on the 1st of December and give you confidence, I hope, that we're in a good position to take on that function from the 1st of December. The second matter is another risk that you would have seen in the news that's happening in New Zealand and Australia, around the world, which is derelict vessels fundamentally sinking in harbours around the world, and the cost that local authorities and governments are bearing in having to deal with that after the effect. This region is not any different than the rest of the world, and we have that same issue happening here. So we're keen to have a good conversation with the council today around the risks that pose. Bottom of the cliff, top of the cliff type conversations. Bottom of the cliff, very expensive. Top of the cliff still has costs, but nowhere near as expensive as at the bottom of the risk. And we want to have a good conversation with you around your risk appetite, and the team have some thoughts about how we can manage those risks. So before you today, you'll all know Patrick, who is the manager over the entirety of our maritime area, Chris Bredenbeck, who is our regional harbour master, and Hayden, who is our acting harbour master right now, because we've had to second Chris away for the last 3 months to address the risks around Taharoa. So with that, I'll hand over to Patrick and Chris.
Thanks for the intro. Good morning, everyone. Brent's probably covered off a lot of the framing for this. I suppose the points that we're really wanting to convey across and enable you to have the discussion around this morning is just the scale and the complexity of what it is that we've been given to do. The fact that we don't have any choice, we haven't had any choice in respect of timeframes. This has been an exercise in gearing up quickly in an area that we haven't sort of managed previously, and also sort of understanding that that means a knock-on effect for our wider maritime services, in that we're already a pretty stretched, overprescribed area of work, and that this has had quite a significant impact on our sort of BAU type ability as well. So, most of you will know Chris Bredenbeck, our regional harbour master. He's been immersed in this for some months now, and we'll turn to Chris to take us through the technical aspects of what we're facing. So,
thanks. Good morning. If we just start with the next slide up there. Okay, so I'll give a little bit of a background around Taharoa Iron Sands. So they operate a large-scale iron ore mine at Taharoa. Taharoa is on the west coast. It's not far south of Kawhia. So the mine runs a fairly unique operation in that it pumps iron ore slurry out to a single buoy mooring, and that's about 3.5 k's off the coast. And then it gets pumped into some very large bulk carrier ships, which then take the cargo off to Asian markets. It's actually a really unique operation. It's the only one of this type in the Southern Hemisphere. So the buoy, it's the central focal point for an area on the coast that actually gets referred to as the Port of Taharoa, or more technically, the Taharoa Offshore Terminal. The image on the left up there, that's what's in our bylaw, and the small writing is the navigation safety rules as it relates to the recreational vessels that access that area. And on the right is the nautical chart, which for anyone who's a boatie will understand that they've got a bit more detail in them. So those areas that are marked in pink on that chart indicate things like compulsory pilotage areas, areas where anchoring can occur, areas where fishing can't occur, and some aids to navigation on the side. So I won't give you too much more on that. So the background, so since New Zealand Steel set up this business here in 2000, the Maritime Safety Authority, which is now Maritime New Zealand, they assumed the functions and duties and powers of the Harbour Master for the operation. And this came about because at the time, the Waikato Regional Council did not have any big ship skills, experience, and it was important enough to central government that it went ahead and Maritime Safety Authority took on that Harbour Master responsibility to make it happen. And that happened through a transfer of power agreement from the Waikato Regional Council through to what's now Maritime New Zealand. And Maritime New Zealand has delivered this function for the port for the last 25 years. So it's a pretty unique situation for a port to be owned and operated by a single company, which means essentially that a single company has their own harbour master. In September last year, Maritime New Zealand surprised us with a letter advising they'll be handing back the responsibility for the port, and that was going to take place 1 July 2025. We quickly identified the scale, the complexity of the responsibility, and sought a bit of extra time to do our due diligence, and Maritime New Zealand reluctantly agreed to an extension to 1 December, which was absolutely necessary. So next page, please. The Port and Harbour Marine Safety Code, it's essentially a guide for best practice for both the harbour masters and port operators in managing maritime safety in the ports of New Zealand. Waikato Regional Council is a signatory to that code. We agree that we'll deliver our responsibilities in accordance with the code. So I've described the code a little bit more detail in the report, but this flowchart briefly describes some of the responsibilities of council. That's in the green on the left, and the responsibilities with the port. So the port operator will primarily focus on the safety in the port area. So that's the shore-based and around the buoy itself. And the Waikato Regional Council will assume responsibility for maritime safety in the wider harbour. So we look wide and they look more focused. We have to both deliver safety management systems. They need to be integrated. The Port and Harbour Marine Safety Code is a guide as to the minimum requirements that we need to have, and it's all about collaboration and ensuring that the port and the council work really, very closely together on managing risks. It's quite an in-depth document, and that's a very short kind of explanation of it. Next page, please. From a risk point of view, so through a risk assessment, some of the key risks, and they're going to be although the risks aren't unique to our area, the why each of those risks are present relate to the operation itself. So collision, grounding, contacts, loss of stability, fire, explosion, oil spill, weather events, mooring breakouts. Those are the key risks that were identified, and there's all sorts of mitigations in place that we oversee and that the port deliver. So as part of the risk assessment, they look at things like the seabed profile. So you think of a big ship coming in other ports, they've got shallow areas to deal with, they've got channels and things like that. This is kind of an open piece of coast, and the profile of the coast is helpfully reasonably benign, reasonably consistent. So the buoy itself sits in 30 metres of depth. It's a really good amount of depth for dealing with that, and the seabed sort of gradually shallows as it gets up. There's no really distinctive issues sitting out in the port, which is quite helpful. So next page. The risk assessment also considers things like the prevailing wind direction, average wind speeds, swell direction, swell height, and they look at that over a period of a year. And probably the key thing that keeps safety there is it's a compulsory pilotage area. So every time that ship's in, it must have a qualified pilot on board. Each approach is done through a pilot plan, so they know the approaches that they'll take it with the ships, dealing with the swell and the wind direction and things like that. So the pilotage program is the key risk mitigation for this. That's an example on the left of a pilotage plan. They have a different one for all different weather conditions, so they know when it's coming from the southeast, from the west, or whatever it is, the different approach that they'll take, and that those are well put together. So next page, please. This image shows the three this is one of the ships, and the three ships are on rotation. So these are the biggest ships that come to New Zealand. They are in the realms of nearly 240 metres long. They are massive. Where it says gross tonnage, that actually is a measure of the ship's internal volume. It's not the ship's weight. It's a basis for how they do fees and regulations and safety rules. But the bottom right image includes the buoy that they moor those vessels to, and the Margaret J, which is in behind there, she's actually a 26-metre tug, so it gives some perspective to size of that piece of engineering. Next page. This is the Taharoa Destiny. She's currently moored by the hawser to the mooring buoy, and she has her load lines connected. This is how they load the vessel. That vessel's pretty empty at the moment. Its load lines are pretty high in the water. And she'll just load up over a period of days and get lower and lower. And once she's filled, she'll be off to her next location. Next page. So this is a description of what it sort of looks like underwater. So that buoy is a really critical piece of infrastructure. It's subject to survey. It has annual inspections. It's a really unique piece of kit, and this is just a description of kind of what it looks like underneath. That's all under resource consent.
Sorry, with that diagram, there's also an RMA component to the loading in that, because the iron ore is sluiced out, so it's large volumes of water are used to sluice it out. That's then dewatered. So there's quite a significant discharge from that vessel, because they don't want to be transporting water back to Asia. You know, they're trying to get the water out there. So if sometimes flying south, you might see a really large sediment sort of circle out around there, and they're often reported to us by members of the public. That's their discharge to their consent to discharge in that dewatering process. Yeah.
It actually looks quite oily as it's dewatering. It does get a few concerned people calling in.
As best we can tell. Yeah.
Next page, please. So this will give you some scale to the buoy when you see the people standing on top of it. It's a really fine piece of engineering. It's got quite strong requirements with really tight tolerances for its ability to do what it does. And it's they've got two of them. So one sits on a mooring in Kawhia. So if there was a failure or an issue with it, they can, or if they're servicing it, they can take it away and replace it with the other buoy and keep business operating. So those are a big part of their business. And that's just an image of, closer up image of Margaret J. she's a very old vessel, and her job is to get the load lines and bring them up to the ship for connection and just assist with the mooring of the big boats. So thank you. Next page. So what's the harbour master role? It's quite varied. As I said earlier, pilotage is probably the key risk mitigation, the main part of this dealing with safety there. So the harbour master has a role of oversight of the pilotage. We lead things like pilot exams. We have input into the pilot training plans. We're required to be consulted with by Maritime New Zealand for any changes to pilot programs, and we support the pilot training. Pilots are employed by Taharoa Iron Sands Limited, but they go through a very strict process of qualification, and I've had the pleasure of sitting with the pilots, and I'm very comfortable that it's a professionally delivered safety product that they're doing. So we also, so council must approve the harbour safety policy, and then we have to do a harbour safety plan which will give effect to that policy. So harbour safety plans are a requirement of the code I mentioned earlier, and it dictates how we go about our business. Emergency responses, so we need to develop, maintain emergency manuals and conduct drills annually, work conjointly with Taharoa Iron Sands Limited on just dealing with emergencies when and if they occur. We have a very in-depth safety management system, and we need to oversee that implementation and operation of the safety management system. We've got ongoing risk assessments, continuous improvement requirements, and it'll be a long and regular process of just going through that annually. We have ultimate responsibility for ensuring maritime safety in the harbour. So that's any vessel that's going through that area, not just the Taharoa Iron Sands Limited vessels. So we have to look wider and just manage that. And we've just required to ensure that Port SMS is operating as well. So the safety management system harbour-wide is ours, safety management system port-wide is theirs, but we have an oversight of that to ensure that they're delivering it as they say they should. And then it's leading annual reviews of the risk assessments, the risk controls, effectiveness of the SMS, and conducting post-incident reviews, debriefs, and that sort of thing. So, and then every ship, so there's probably about 20 per year. I think on average it's been 18 in recent times, but that can go up and down with demand a little bit. And we've got to monitor each arrival and departure of that. So we'll have things like in-person, several times a year in person, being there, monitoring those arrivals, and then with vessel tracking, weather system monitoring and things like that. So it can be days for a ship to be sitting off and waiting for the right weather conditions, or it can be plain sailing and she comes in half a day and it's done. But in general, that's very short version of what our responsibility sits at, or what my responsibility sits at with this part.
I suppose we've very much taken a due diligence approach to this. I suppose when Maritime first made us aware that this was coming our way, we thought that the prudent thing to do was to, by all means, look at what it was that Maritime New Zealand had in place, but to actually go and check for ourselves that all the, that we were actually in a good place. So part of this process was we engaged a master mariner consultant, a highly experienced international master mariner, and a good guy to deal with. He was extremely helpful in respect of mapping out what it is that we needed to have in place and to what standards. So his input to get to this point has been invaluable. Another really significant part of this for us is not just the fact that we're taking on that harbour master function, we've also got to integrate it into Waikato Regional Council. So what does that mean in respect of finance, insurance, policy, health and safety, etc.? So we've also got a little team together who's been working on that for a wee while to try and make sure that we're integrating it correctly into the council structure as well. The knock-on effects, as I say, Chris has been taken away from his usual harbour master duties. I think that's been all of the last 3 months. That's had a real knock-on effect for the rest of the team and their ability to operate, and just recognising Hayden for stepping into that harbour master role in that time. And that's going to continue. So once we're actually up and running from 1st of December, we've still got a lot of rework to do with the maritime team at a wider level to be able to keep providing a level of service across all the rest of their functions as well. So, but yes, if there's any questions or.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, thanks, guys, and just understanding that you've had Crispy tied up for 3 months just shows the amount of work that goes into this project. Just a couple of things for me, but with the pilotage and that sort of thing, so that's TIL's responsibility completely, but noting that it's not something that we've ever been involved with through maritime, being the fact that we don't have big ports to look after. What's our requirement in that space? I know you sort of sit beside training and things like that, but just how big a piece of that?
Yeah, so for us, it's that I guess we'd look at it from a regulatory point of view. So we're kind of making sure that they're delivering what it is that they're supposed to deliver. It's quite prescriptive in legislation, so it's compulsory pilotage area, and then maritime rules set out the things that they must do. So we've got a really clear guide of what must occur, and it's an oversight position for us to
So
deliver.
that consistency from what's happening now with maritime will continue through to us, and it should be a fairly seamless.
Yes, because the December, not only do we change to us taking over the harbour master role, the pilotage, their ability to deliver pilots is being reviewed as well. So they're having a reassessment or a requalification as their pilot plans at the same time. So we're being integrated into that decision-making process with Maritime New Zealand at the same time. So it's quite useful.
Yeah. Next question, just around enforcement and that sort of thing. So obviously there's some navigation issues around the port itself, no fishing, speed limits, etc. like that. So where do we sit in the enforcement side of things? Are we going to need a vessel keeping an eye on other vessels transiting through that area, watching that area?
Yeah, so that's our responsibility now. We're already doing that. So we've got the equipment that we need to. And if we can't be there, there's unlikely to be recreational vessels there at the same time. So with weather conditions. So I think we've got what we need to manage it. We're already dealing with it. We deal with incursions at the moment.
Cool. And I just noticed through finance yesterday that we have had issues with clients with TIL in the past, and I'm just wondering sort of issues we may think of that are going to affect us in the future with that company, their operations.
Yep. I suppose.
Just noting we are in a public.
Thank you. Yes. I think it's fair to say that this council is dealing with Taharoa Iron Sands probably on 3 or 4 or even 5 different fronts, different parts of our business interacting with their business. Obviously, we've got the RMA compliance side of things, and yep, that's been what it's been. This is, I suppose, we're looking at this somewhat like a new relationship, or certainly a new working relationship. We're just taking it on face value as we're launching into it in good faith, and we expect the same from them. If any issues arise, we'll deal with them as they arise.
And I guess probably another question that's going to come out from other councillors, but just a cost indication on the extra resources, etc., to do this, and when would council potentially see that, noting the 1st of December? uptake?
Yes, and I suppose it's where you draw the line on it. There's the specific, so once these 20 visits a year start occurring, and Chris or some delegate for Chris is going to have to be available to provide that function through that. So that's a cost that is currently unbudgeted for. And then it's we draw the line there, but then there's been the preparation to date, which of course again has been unbudgeted but essential. We've had no choice but to do that area of work. We've then got taking Chris out of the maritime team. We're going to have to restructure, I suppose, to a degree. There'll be costs associated with that. So it's there's going to be a number of costs. Some of them are quite direct, I think, quite direct in respect of they would sit with Taharoa. Some are probably less, a little bit greyer as to where they sit, because part of them are our preparation to provide a service, which I suppose it could be one way of looking at it, is that we haven't had to provide that service for the last 25 years when we could have. So we've had to gear up to that point, but then there's the knock-on effects for the team as well. So as I said, sorry, probably not a very clear answer, but where do you draw the line on what the costs are?
Just noting that council did provide 100,000 to sort of get this underway, and I'm imagining that will run out quickly. So.
Yeah, well, so one thing that we have done, so this council provided an extra maritime officer to come online on the 1st of July this year. We've had to repurpose that into a more technical role to take some of Chris's existing functions off him. We're currently recruiting it. We're actually really struggling to fill that role, but even at that point, we're already one maritime officer down to be able to provide this service. So,
Thanks, Patrick. Thank you.
And all of this had previously been provided by Maritime New Zealand, right?
Correct.
Funded and provided by them. Because they don't want to hand over any of that cash. Oh, it's worth asking.
Can I just comment on that? And Chris, you might be able to, because I presume Maritime or the government gets royalties from the operations, and I don't know if they help fund Maritime New Zealand operations or how that's worked, but is there an opportunity to try and see if there's another funding group?
So any ships that are coming into New Zealand waters pay fees based on their weight and their size and things like that, and that goes to Maritime New Zealand. So Maritime New Zealand's, those fees don't pay for their harbour master function. So those fees are, well, actually, I mean, I guess essentially they do, but it's not unique to the Taharoa vessels that come in. It's a cost that goes against every vessel that comes in, and it pays for Maritime New Zealand services. So they've had a direct billing hour for hour and some other arrangements with Taharoa to pay for the harbour master function independently of the ships' fees as they come in.
We're probably now getting drawn into the model that the rest of the country is already in, that it's actually a regional function to provide that harbour master function. And we've sort of been exempted for whatever reasons for that last 25 years, and now we're being drawn into the same model as Littleton, Mount Maunganui, Auckland, etc.
Good thing there's still a regional council to give it to, eh? All right, where are we at? Are you finished, Warren? Councillor Kneebone.
Yeah, thanks. Chris, probably for you. In terms of when a ship comes in, it's there for a couple of days, will you or any of your, whoever the harbour master is, on the day have to physically be there, or can you monitor it remotely from here and respond accordingly if needed?
Yeah, look, through our safety management system, we've agreed to a nominal number of how many times I'll be there in person. 5, I believe. But we'll have the system set up here in the building where I've got the vessel tracking weather live information that we can sort of monitor it remotely. So we don't have to physically be there, but when we are there, there'll be just a bit more of an auditory kind of oversight of of the operations. that comes
And
through.
are you, do they give you some office space today when you're there?
It'll be on board the ships, so
Oh,
we'll
right.
fly out with the
Oh,
pilots.
okay.
Yep.
Oh. So at the moment, the pilots come from New Plymouth, do they?
The pilots, so they're flown in, so they operate their own helicopter and it brings them in. So the two newest pilots are actually Tauranga-based pilots who are now qualified and trained to deliver pilot services here. And the main pilot, I believe, is New Plymouth, or the chief pilot, Peter Jackson. So
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Chris, thanks for the report. Very interesting. First question, and I guess you've already done this, is you've reviewed Maritime New Zealand's risk register. So you've copied it, no doubt. And what I'm more interested in is, do they keep an incident report? And if so, have we got access to that and copied it? So that the sorts of things that have happened over the last 25 years, which things. And the other question I have, which I guess is answers itself, is why Maritime New Zealand thinks Suddenly Regional Council got experience in dealing with the biggest ships to come into New Zealand. Didn't believe that 25 years ago. Don't have to answer that. Just seems a bit incongruous that this should be done at this late stage. I'm interested in the incident reports because that can actually put a bit of insight into.
I'll just get you to keep your lights on down there. That way you keep a
Yeah.
microphone.
There we go. So through disclosure, we received the risk assessments. We've received information of previous incidents, and they were well considered into our own risk assessment that we've had done since, and as will any incidents that have occurred since then or continue to occur. It's an ongoing process. So really comfortable with the information that we've got and the understanding of previous incidents. I answered that. I just thought there was a second part to the question. Yeah. Yeah. Look, it's been quite a learning curve for me as well. So this year I've done some extramural study to allow for it. So I've done a diploma in Harbour Masters through Lloyd's Academy in the UK to sort of upskill myself, as well as being instrumental in writing most of these documents and plans and safety things. So I feel like we're in a good place. We will have this by December 1st. It's the knock-on effects for maritime that might just take a bit more working through. So
I think we've got to be sort of eyes wide open too as to what the first 12 months looks like. I think we've got to pay particular attention to all of this through a full set of seasons, a full 20 visits, those vessels all getting a year older, and I think there'll be a lot of learning for us through that first 12 months, and then we'll see where it takes us as to what's required from there. But best foot forward on the 1st of December is where we want to be.
Graham's been waiting for a
Oh,
while.
I've got Noel, Graham,
Right.
Ben, Angela. Noel.
Thank you. Warren touched on costs. I'm just interested in what discussions have been held with Taharoa Iron Sands as to what they're prepared to pay for. Probably nothing, but the degree of monitoring and reporting of all those costs, and when will we be looking to recover those costs. The next part is mentioned having to restructure with an internal team, and I know without getting into detail, and the man's left the building, about restructure. And I think during the annual plan, we heard that the council was holding 50 vacancies. So there's a few $1 million sitting there, not spent. So I really want Chris.
I'm guessing that, guessing those vacancies wouldn't necessarily sit within your particular team, but
Chris can initiate a restructure to make the organisation fit the needs going forward, rather than
I did actually want your attention of, so do I need to start again or did you hear what I was saying? Please don't. No, so costs. Comment down here was that there's already been an internal restructure of the harbour master. There was comment during the annual plan that we had 50 vacancies being held because of the restructures going on in the building. And obviously there's some savings there. So what are you looking to do going forward in moving that around and putting a proposal to council, will be the next council no doubt, as to how you reshape the organisation? And this is only a minor part, I appreciate, of the organisation, but the costs going forward, how they're captured and how they will be applied and recovered from Iron Sands Limited, and also within the building, the restructure possible. I'll talk about the 50 vacancies at some stage, but not today.
So I don't have any plans to do any further restructuring at the moment in the organisation. There's possibly some discussions that Brent might need to consider within his directorate. The vacancies that were held were vacancies that need to be filled, but I hadn't held so that redeployment options could be considered by those people being affected by the other organisation changes going on. In terms of what your thoughts and plans are for those vacancies, we can have that conversation offline.
Yeah, you will.
In terms of the costs of this, I think the team have indicated there's a bit to work through. We need to get going and to understand what the actual impact is going to be over time. I think Patrick's mentioned the first 12 months, see what actually lands out of it. When this was first sold to us, it was, gosh, you just need to sit at a desk and look at wave height, make sure it doesn't tie up at the wrong time. It's as they've worked through actually what's involved to do the role.
Yeah, I'm concerned that we don't roll back and just wait and see what it's costing, etc., and then go and say, well, now you've got to pay. I just want the pressure to be kept on at some stage. They're the causation of what's happening, and so there's cause and effect. So somebody's got to pay for it.
So, yeah, and just to help with that, so I've got a meeting with the Director of Maritime New Zealand in about 10 days' time, just to have a little bit of a discussion and to see if there's any opportunities for anything in terms of revenues they collect that can contribute to the cause, hence my question before.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I can answer. So currently Taharoa pays Maritime New Zealand at an hourly rate for the delivery. I'm meeting with Taharoa and Sands staff next week to talk through a service level agreement and hour for hour billing for my time. So, yep.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned there's a direct relationship with the Health Council. Is that covered by a contract or?
We have a MOU, so it's not finalised. It's in draft and it should be signed up in the next couple of weeks. We also are working for a tripartite MOU that includes Maritime New Zealand as in a transitionary phase as well. So what support Maritime New Zealand will give us in the as we're finding our feet in this role. So
I can have another question. Insurance. This is going to have a huge impact on council's insurance. I think.
You go. Yeah, it's still in our work stream. So we have plans to be sitting down with Aon and working through what that is. We already have Harbour Master insurance, but we need to assess whether the Harbour Master insurance we have is adequate when we take into account these risks. Yep.
I just thinking about this in charge on an hourly rate. See, there could be quite different cover all the costs that council incurs. Things like insurance. Costs will ways of recovery. the outset. There can't be cross subsidisation here. It has to stand alone and
Yep. So we have a mechanism in the was it the annual plan, long-term plan to for actual and reasonable costs specific to Taharoa, and that would include the hourly as well. So I think the mechanism is there, but there'll still be some work to do as to how we cover and what we recover. And
Ben,
Yeah, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say it's great to have you here to raise those issues because I'm concerned that you're going to go into negotiations in a week's time on an hourly rate basis and hadn't actually picked all of those other issues up. Secondly, that Taharoa has been used to dealing with Maritime New Zealand who have insurance for the whole of New Zealand. So ours is a discrete case. Our costs may be significantly higher than they're used to paying. And that it's everything kicking in by December 1. I would have thought some of these costings were getting closer to be finalised now. So do you have an idea of the approximate costs?
No, we're still working on that. So that's an ongoing piece of work with another part of council. Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, we hear with electric buses, it might be 288 million, you know, so at what point do we know the figure? Because we're about to disappear and there'll be a interregnum period.
I
By the time
suppose,
you start.
yeah, look, I suppose this, if I can refer to it as a hospital pass, we were going to land this on the first, we were going to get this on the 1st of July. You know, and we just simply would not have been anywhere near ready. We've had to reshuffle the deck chairs to get to the point that we can be well prepared for 1 December in respect of the stuff that we absolutely have to deliver. And we're working in earnest, I suppose, to get all of that lined up, and absolutely costs are part of that. But we're just not there yet. We're still working, as I say, Chris and one of the people that we've engaged to support some of our internal things. We're working on this currently. So it's just timing. But look, we're doing what we can in the time that's available to us. Ideally, this should have come from Maritime New Zealand in at least an annual plan cycle, if not a long-term plan cycle, and it just didn't. And so we've had to appear completely out of cycle. But we will get there. But we just can't give you those figures today.
So two things. One, could I suggest that Graham is involved in discussions with you about what you're going to sit into your agreements prior to that meeting? And secondly, this is an unfunded mandate. So to speak out Chris's point about, do we know how much, I mean, it's quite a discrete figure. How much do they get from bringing those specific boats into New Zealand, to Maritime New Zealand? Because presumably the rest of the country's been operating for a century on other areas. This is a unique case. We should be able to say, this is how much you get in royalties. We need that. They're walking away, leaving an underfunded mandate.
Harbour Master functions are regionally funded, so it's port operators, port companies that is where the regional councils get their funding from. So not from through Maritime New Zealand levies.
sorry, can I just get him a mic back there? No.
Of dropping this onto us. And the other question was, it says a mix of regional funding and industry funding. What is that percentage normally?
We have asked a little bit of that information, and it varies. So it just varies on the local business. So every time we get that, there's no.
What would we wish to ask for in this case then?
100%.
Yeah, because there's no other
Yep.
industry here. So, I mean, to compare this to other ports seems a moot point to me, because there's only one company that uses this port. There is no other cross-subsidization of other income streams that can be derived here.
Yep.
Right? Yep.
If I could just add to that, so I think in terms of Chris's response, just saying, 100% sort of thing, this is there's only one beneficiary of this, and that's the company. And, in terms of wider public good, should there be a ratepayer subsidy for this to be able to occur? The principle we're taking is, well, in principle, no. But, we'd have to probably go through our funding policies and check it. And Brent's probably already sort of been looking at all of those in terms of the wider. But this is different. It is kind of different to everything else we do under the RMA and so on. And that's why I'm quite interested to have a discussion with Maritime New Zealand. We don't have cruise ships coming in, tying into the ports. We can get other revenue streams, and we don't have port companies, running multiple different lines. It is different.
I just want to, I've got other speakers, but I just want to go back to Graham because it seemed like you were wanting to follow on from some of Ben's questioning. So I just want to come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Already I can see the difference. Crown, as I understand it, self-insure. Council doesn't. And so we need to be very careful that we're not overly influenced. The charging that Maritime New Zealand has undertaken in the past, we need to look at what the cost structures are likely to be, WRC.
Yes.
Because they could be significantly different.
Totally agree. All right. I've got Angela, Noel, and then Robbie. Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just listening with interest and agree. It's great to have Graham here as one of our appointed committee chairs. Yeah, nothing really to add. I think, Councillor Smith, great line of questioning. Those were my questions as well. So, yeah, thank you.
No.
I think I want to go back and reinforce what Graham and Ben have alluded to in the cost structure. And for me, those of us who are old enough to remember the RENA incident, I say that tongue in cheek, but the RENA was the second most expensive recovery operation in the world, second largest cost recovery in the world. So that's millions, tens of millions, I don't know, 100 million, whatever it was. It's, way up there. Aon, I don't know, we deal with them locally and so on, but, obviously they'll go back to Lloyd's. It's going to be a hell of a lot of money. I would say that a lot worse. So to me, this is frightening where it's going to come back on the council and waiting for, getting other things out of the way before you, I think it's now you go and talk about insurance and get the ducks lined up, because this won't be a 5-minute assessment. And okay, you've got 25 years of history of those boats operating, but as you mentioned before, they're going to get older year by year. Okay, they really only have got their diesel fuel or crude or bunker oil or whatever. It's a pretty rough West Coast, but it's still environmentally an issue. So one of those boats get loose and come up onto the coast. Bigger ships, the RENA would be a little tugboat compared to those ships. So I'm concerned that insurance should be right at the front. Ask you to get on with it. Thank you.
The other thing is, bear in mind that the responsibility if something was to go wrong still sits with Maritime New Zealand. So we're insuring for our piece of the liability, which is much smaller than the RENA.
And the company and the ship owners.
Yep.
Your costs in the interim that
Absolutely.
we would have to cover. So it's the unknown that's frightening. And we don't want on day one to have a ship go wrong or we haven't got ourselves. Thank you.
And I thought with the RENA, the Bay of Plenty Regional Council was up for most of the cost, wasn't it? Millions of dollars.
Being a shaking of heads down there.
I can't speak to that.
Okay. And I suppose, you're obviously hearing a collective concern here. Given that we are just over a month away from an election cycle, I'm can we get some indication of what is the time frame? When is some of this going to come back? Who's it going to come back to? Where's the decision-making going to sit in order for this to be able to stand up on the 1st of December?
So if we, there's a few things that have come through that I just want to pick up on. The matter of insurance, it's a matter that we've discussed before. It's been well on our agenda for some time. The cost framework that's going to be coming, which is why Chris mentioned that through the last annual plan, you might recall you made some changes to your fees and charges structure, which at that time you didn't have the ability because you didn't know what the cost would be to set a cost. So you had to immunise yourself as best as possible by having an hourly rate plus disbursements, which the insurance will be part of. Of course, we don't have the function until the 1st of December. And so we're going to have to pay that insurance fee before the 1st of December and then recover the money later. But you've put in place in your annual plan a mechanism for doing so. The comment about we should know what that is already, it's a sequence of events that Chris has been working through. What are our responsibilities? What are Maritime's responsibilities? Exactly as Graham said, they're different now than before because Maritime was one big thing, centrally insured as the Crown, and now they're still there. They still have significant responsibilities at the port, as does Taharoa, as do we as the Harbour Master. And so there's quite a process for Chris to go through to say, what are our responsibilities? So then we can clearly articulate our responsibilities to the insurer, which as Chris has just explained is happening over the next couple of weeks. So then we can see, is our current Harbour Master insurance, which is something like $1 million or something to that extent, $5 million, is that adequate? And they may say, for the things that you are responsible for, it is. So we're going through that process, but we have to step our way through that. And it may come in future that Patrick and Chris are able to come back and say we have a very, very clear idea of the cost of operating this function, and we go to a different funding mechanism where we charge them upfront for the totality of the cost, as opposed to charging them as we go. But we won't know that until we've gone through the process. So all of those things are in hand. I have great deal of confidence that the team have taken very good technical and process advice about getting the systems in place. But the reality is that we have to pay for some stuff before we have the ability to recover it back from the entity. And Chris is having those conversations to make it really clear that they are the entity that needs to fund this activity. And so when we talk about restructuring, that's about Chris. We may need to have some of the delegations that are sitting with Chris as the regional harbour master sitting elsewhere as well, because Chris can't be in 2 places at once. So we may have to do some restructuring around that. And as Patrick has identified, because we're having to move some resources into this space, that affects our level of service that we can provide for our recreational services around the rest of around the region. The council decided that level of service needed to be lifted. You gave us 2 additional resources to lift that service. We're having to deflect some of that resource into Taharoa. And so we will need to come back to you through the appropriate annual planning process to say, what is the level of service that we're able to provide with the resources that we have, and whether or not the council wishes to provide resources to have the level of service that you had intended at the beginning of your last LTP. And that'll be a conversation that we will come back to you with. But the restructure isn't going to be, it'll be within existing FTE and within existing budget, because that's what we do. We realign things within our existing budget and FTE, unless you are of a mind through an LTP process or annual plan process to provide additional resource for a level of service that you want to provide through to the community. So I think you can have confidence that these things are in hand, but there are going to be some things where we will have no choice. We will have no choice but to put in place the insurance before the 1st of December, because we don't want something happening on the 3rd of December. And we will be able to report back what that cost is through the appropriate committee. But there is no choice for this council. It's just not tenable not to have the appropriate insurance in place. We just don't know right now what they would change in terms of our premium when they fully see our change in responsibilities. Hopefully that helps.
Okay. So I've got Robbie, Warren, Ben, and Jen. Robbie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is more going back to the arena. How much responsibility do we take if something like that occurs on that coastline? And like we've gone through with biosecurity, with the plan being released, how much power have we got to make that response happen as quick as possible? Or is that going to be left with Maritime Museum and others and working with the shipping company to make that happen? Or have we got any power like in this to make that response happen quicker? Or
So this is in respect of,
an
there is an
incident,
incident and responding to the incident? Well,
because
that's,
it's the Waikato community that's going to live with the incident, not anybody else. That's what I'm trying to get to that point.
sure, well, you'll be aware of the marine oil spill structure, the regional on-scene command structure, you know, yes, we do have a role in that, but that's very much, that is a maritime function. It's that's one of the things that they are there to do, is to provide that response. And so, you know, it would be for them to gear up quickly and supported by us, of course, but not led by us.
So any of those responses would have to come out of Auckland, Tauranga, or New Plymouth.
Oh, and depending on what it is, potentially internationally. Yeah, so I suppose a couple of things, whether they're, I can't recall whether they're in the report or not. Scale is a really big thing here. So by gross product, this is actually going to be the 5th largest port. This is the 5th largest port in the country, just by weight of material coming and going. Chris talked about the risks associated with going into harbour for other large commercial vessels, but then they're in safe harbour. These vessels are not in a safe harbour. They're out in open water. And this is a figure that's the fact that I've heard. Chris might be able to cross-check me on this. My understanding is that there is not a vessel in this part of the world that's actually powerful enough to tow one of these large vessels if they lose power, lose steering. So that's with, you know, there's a lot of big factors associated with this. You know? And that's why there has to be so much planning, identifying risks, all of those things up front. And that's why we've taken the approach that we have of making sure that we've identified all of the risks and have got all of the appropriate planning in place to be able to respond to those from 1 December. That's but also understanding there are roles that Maritime New Zealand has and distinctly has. So
What I mean is, if you take it to what happened with the clam, it was blooming 6 months before any decisions got made. We don't want incidents like that taking place again.
Yeah, thanks. Just stepping away from the port at the moment, but just like to hear from Hayden sort of thing. Is this going to leave a hole in our levels of service and the things that you know, ratepayers are going to see around the peninsula over what is going to be one of the busiest times, obviously with summer coming up and vessels, everything out there in the harbours?
Yeah, thanks, Warren. Sure, in my opinion, in our current structure, I see that you know, it would take the efforts away of Chris and his you know, his attention. It would put it onto this risk where it needs to be, and so that's where we are looking quite a lot at the restructure and filling those gaps. You know, whether we're looking at you know, increasing our assets as well, you know, our vessels and our capability on the water, our knowledge, our skill sets, making sure people are in the right positions who have those qualifications, looking at foreign going vessels, international shipping, bulk carriers, things like that. So yes, you see that, you know, senior maritime advisor role that we're currently advertising for, have that knowledge and that position to support the regional harbour master.
Yeah, I guess my question was probably a bit more around what we would normally expect to see around the peninsula, for example, in the summertime. Are we going to see less of it, and is it something we need to get ahead of?
So the obvious thing is the maritime officer that we were going to have, so that single maritime officer would have been embedded in in the recreational sector. What we do through that busy time is we have other team members who join on to that professional person to be able to do patrol work, that kind of thing. And so that one person becomes quite valuable and proportionate. They're off the table now. Chris's availability will be off the table through that busy period as well. So I mean, all guys and girls will do everything that they can, but it is already a reduced capability.
Yeah. No, that clarifies where I was going. Yeah, thank you.
Ben.
Yeah, I'm concerned that we're not taking what Graham's talking to us about insurance seriously enough, and that we're going to sign an insurance agreement by the 1st of December, which is literally 2 months away, and we haven't begun these discussions yet. I've just looked up the cost of the RENA, which presumably, if you were an insurer, you would look at. So the RENA cost the insurers $700 million. It cost the government $47 million, of which 27 was paid by the owner. Thankfully, the regional council only had to pay $100,000 by the looks of this, but nevertheless, someone's going to be assessing this, and we're signing an agreement by the 1st of December when we haven't begun negotiations yet. So I would like to get some kind of a report back, maybe to the full council meeting, or certainly from the chief executive, about where are we at with these discussions? Because as you say, Brett, you can't start on the 1st of December without insurance, but if the costs may be so huge and the vessel's such that no one can tow it away, if it's, we've got big issues.
I think the thing that would help, councillor, is who's responsible for what. And so the things that you've described about the RENA, and one of the reasons that you'll see that the regional council had such a small piece of that is that all of those things weren't their responsibility. And so maybe it's going to be helpful for you if Chris is able to articulate what are our responsibilities, because the things that I think you're concerned about, from my understanding, aren't our responsibilities, which is why it's been really important for Chris to be able to articulate to the insurers what are our responsibilities. So, Chris.
Yeah, look, I hear where you come from, but the vessel, the recovery, the oil spill, the response, that's central government. We won't be insuring for that. That's not a regional council issue. So our insurance my understanding of it, Harbour Master Insurance relates to things like our aids to navigation. If we had a failure, and that might have contributed to an issue, we might have some liability in that area. So we're not insuring for the catastrophic loss of a vessel or the cost of that oil spill, but a portion of it that exposes us to some liability. So I would expect that our insurance that we have now could be deficient, but by how much? I'm not expecting us to come in with a really, really significant change to what we've got now. So, but bear in mind this is underway. We've got, we're certainly not going into it expecting a last minute thing. It's just one of the steps that we need to work through in the next few weeks.
I'm just going to ask Graham, are you comfortable with that explanation?
I'm comfortable with the approach they're taking to doing that. But as I said before, we need to be very aware, just because Maritime New Zealand had one approach to cost recovery may not fit council. And talk about scale, this is going to be a bigger part of WRC than it has been within Maritime. And they might have had a different approach and put other ratepayer issues to consider as well. I just think we need to be very mindful of this. We're going to learn a lot very quickly. Don't want that to be at the expense of other activities.
Yep.
So I get the tenet of the conversation that councillors are having, and it was asked, how are we going to keep council appraised, especially if we go into an interim period, which is it's for a discrete period of time. There will be a new council in place before this function is taken up. But I think the suggestion before, and maybe you made it, Ben, was that we do keep independent chair of the risk and assurance raised during this process. So that seems a
I think that
sensible,
would be good. Yeah. Great. Just looking, I'm getting nods around the room on that. Here's the can.
So, Madam Chair, will
Yes.
the recommendations that come to the council meeting include retaining his services until the next council makes appointment?
I think Graham has already contracted
Oh, you've
over that, so he remains in place even in our absence. So, yeah, yes. But I think that council is sending a pretty clear signal that we want Graham to stay close to this. So if there is any sort of delegation process that's necessary for that to happen, let's make sure we bring that to council. We finish up. So I've got Jen.
That's all right. I'm keen, but we've got a lot.
All right. The war on Rex.
Thank you.
Was that a?
Sorry,
was that a
change your
break?
mind,
Yeah.
sorry, pivot, change your mindset. So this has been a risk out in our maritime setting for some time. I suppose it's just become more prevalent, more prominent, got more on our radar. And the maritime team have been trying to take a more proactive approach with the issue. There's costs associated with that. The model that we're trying to work towards is where we feel like we've been very much at the bottom of the cliff with this issue. We'd like to get to the top of the cliff, but what we feel we need to do is just map out for you exactly what all the issue is, and then hopefully we can have some discussion as to what is the best way forward from here to manage this risk. And so just turning to Hayden, who's got the detail, and I have to say some images that really nicely portray what it is we're facing. So.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning, councillors. So, afternoon, councillors. So, we've moving the mindset focused away from international ships, right, onto these small vessels that just dot the coastlines of our harbours throughout New Zealand. So, mainly focused on the Waikato region. So, today I'll be providing an update on the risk posed by derelict vessels in our harbours, the action we're taking, and the options for managing this issue going forward. Slide. So looking at the scale of the issue here, across the Waikato, we have 836 consented moorings. A significant number of derelict vessels originate in these areas. Vessels are often stored cheaply and left to deteriorate. So it's not just a Waikato problem. Other regions across New Zealand and internationally are all facing the same challenges. So on that map there, we detailed our main harbours and the main areas of interest of derelict vessels. Next slide, thanks. So a derelict vessel is one that's abandoned, neglected, or beyond economic repair, and they pose navigation hazards, pollution risks, and from fuels and debris. They're often eyesores, look terrible as you can see off those photos there. Slide, thank you. For the War on Wrecks. In February this year, we launched the War on Wrecks project. It's a proactive program identifying vessels at risk and acting before they sink. So far, 14 vessels have been removed from the water, 32 are in progress, 6 were removed at no cost. So you can see a couple of photos there. There's a range of disposal techniques of bringing them out of the water, and each has associated risks depending on associated costs and efforts. depending on location. Just jumping on to the next slide. We're looking at the cost implications. So this year, council has incurred 85,000 in costs for removal of 8 vessels, funding coming through the reforecast process. Further 6 were removed, costs recovered from owners, and looking ahead, the estimated cost to remove 32 vessels currently identified at 525,000. So these costs not budgeted. Jumping on to the escalating risks. The risks increase the longer the vessels remain. Importantly, costs escalate rapidly if they sink. So a vessel might cost 10,000 to remove today, but once it sinks, it can jump over 100,000 for salvage and cleanup. See that scale there, pointing out the smaller vessels, depending on location, and the floating, they're a lot easier and cheaper to get out of the water, should it be planned, worked in, with the larger vessels, in terms of construction, location, if it's above the water, below the water, fuels, debris, costs escalate. Slide. The council does have powers to declare and remove wrecks under the Maritime Transport Act, supported by Navigation Safety Bylaw. There are challenges. Often costs can't be recovered, legal and procedural delays slow down actions, and budgets are stretched. The big one here is the public expect us to act quickly and prevent pollution and hazards. The maritime officers in our team, we feel that in the field. Going on. So what we're doing around that is awareness and education. So we're also tackling the issue through awareness and education, media releases, newsletters, online campaigns, encourage responsible ownership and regular maintenance. And then at a national level, we're looking at working with the Safer Boating Forum to explore legislative improvements, shared responsibility, managing derelict vessels. Slide. What we're showing here is again that pressure regionally as well as internationally. So it's not just a Waikato region problem. Nationally, worldwide, derelict vessels become a growing issue. Harbours and waterways, it's mainly around the aging fleets of vessels, ownership, accountability, and the high cost of proper disposal. So, for example, there's various media releases. You know, our neighbours with Tauranga Regional Council, Bay of Plenty Regional Council, Tauranga, looking over the ditch in Queensland there, where the Queensland government committed 20 million over a 4-year period for dedicated task force, which they named. They achieved over 1,000 vessels coming out of their waterways. And then in the UK and various other places around the world there. Slide. So that brings us on to our options and next steps. So I'll just hand it over to Patrick here to bring you and introduce you, please.
Yeah, so this is where I suppose the governance discussion comes in respect of you know, what's the appropriate path to follow here? What's the most appropriate option for dealing with this issue? I mean, you may have other no problem. Indeed, you may come up with other options, but just the very basic ones that we identify to put in front of you where we can adopt a purely reactive approach, only remove vessels that have actually sunk or are otherwise posing immediate serious risk. Costs will be as they arise. This is that's an option for us. We can sort of go back to our status quo position of dealing with high risk vessels in a sort of odd ad hoc fashion, but without dedicated budget. So we'd be doing that from probably tapping into other maritime-based budgets to be able to fund that on the day. It suggests that risks would remain high and there'd still be relatively elevated vessels, incidents of vessels sinking. And I suppose a good example for us last year was in our list of vessels that we were proactively engaging with owners and trying to get out of the water. One of them actually sunk on the mooring while they were still, while they were on that list, and then suddenly we had no option but to deal with that and the costs associated with it. And then I suppose whether it's viable to have a dedicated budget to maintain the momentum of what it is that the team is currently doing. The idea there, I suppose, is that over time we would be reducing the fleet, the number of derelict vessels there are out there, by removing high risk ones, carrying on with or putting more emphasis on the education side of things, hopefully reducing the number of vessels that become derelict, and getting to the point, and I would suggest it would take a few years to get to that point, like getting to the point that the derelict vessels become somewhat of a rarity around the region. But of the vessels that Hayden's team has currently identified, we would integrate that into all of our other business as usual. That figure that Hayden quoted of the 500,000 having available should we not be able to recover money, that's probably a 3-year, I would suggest there's probably a 3-year portion of work to work through those. So anyway, that was what we were wanting to draw to your attention today, and happy to take any questions and to what we can.
So I just want to make sure I understand the, so you're wanting councillors' feedback on which of these approaches there's a level of comfort on, either the reactive only or the status quo or the dedicated budget.
Yes, or any other options that
Right.
come from this forum.
And just so we kind of understand what we might be gearing up for, if it was the reactive only, what's the budget you require to do that sort of thing?
Oh, if it depends how, and not to be flippant, it would depend how many sink, right? If we'd only be dealing with the vessels that sink, and if that was 3 or 5 or 10 in a year, there would be the costs associated with getting those 3 or 5 or 10 out of the water in that year, and because that's far harder to budget for, because of course
Reactive.
where they fail, the size of the vessel, often it's the composition of the vessel actually can really complicate the recovery as well.
Right.
What fuels, what oils were on board, there's
So reactive, you're saying hard to budget for, no indication really. It's just sort of is what it is kind of a thing.
yeah, and
Okay.
bottom of the cliff.
Right. And status quo, what does that look like from a financial commitment?
Well, I suppose we try and approach this on an ad hoc basis where we can, where we try and be somewhat more proactive, but out of an existing budget. I suppose our difficulty there is, for example, a lot of significant portion of our costs are associated with our vessels, maintenance of our vessels, their motors, their trailers. These are all costs that are just escalating over time. None of those costs are staying static. So I suppose it's really difficult to free up money from existing budgets to try and do something proactive.
So it would be an additional budget to the existing budget that
for us
we
to
have.
be proactive
To be-
in reducing the number of
Right.
known derelicts.
And you don't have any sort of a gauge of what that would look like.
Yes, that's the, well, we would be suggesting Hayden's costings would be, and sort of part of this again is it depends on who it is that you're engaging with. Because, sometimes if we can have meaningful engagement with an owner, we can actually recover those costs. But often what you find with these sorts of vessels is that sometimes it's an occasion of perhaps someone who's somewhat older, bought this boat, with great dreams and just,
Yeah,
we can't recover.
I get that. I'm just trying to, you're looking for guidance from counselors, but it's hard to give guidance if we don't understand. It's kind of like when we say to ratepayers, would you like this? But we don't tell them what it might cost to provide it. So just trying to,
Yeah, well, that 525
525K is what I see in.
we think would give us a proactive budget to clear the most substantially known risk vessels over a 3-year period.
So the 525 would give you this C, the dedicated budget.
Yes.
Okay. Got it. Okay. I've got Noel, Jen, Robbie, Ben, Angela, and Stu. Noel.
There's just two issues, and I may be a bit flippant with the first one. Yesterday, Robbie and I and Greg had our weekly meeting in ICM, and I asked why the vessel, which is rated, the one that's coming into the river system for the Waikato catchment, why that couldn't be used in the harbours because it's rated for sea. And I was told that there's a special license to get it from Whangarei down to the river, license for the river, but could be. So it's just something in the back of the mind, think outside the box, and if it's on the west coast, certainly it could be floated down to Raglan or Kawhia. It may help them, but anyway, the issue is cost recovery. When I was at the court, I had the responsibility of recovering the government's debt, fines and preparation, etc. And we were pretty good at thinking outside the box. So do our bylaws actually put the onus on the owners to get the boats out of the water? And is there a provision that those costs can be recovered? And if so, do these people who have abandoned their boats, they may be elderly, they may be sick, they may be whatever. There are creative ways of getting money out of people. Councils don't generally get comfort things, a softly approach, but sometimes we need to a little bit. And just challenge council to think a bit more proactively and affirmatively in cost recovery. So firstly, do our bylaws allow for cost recovery in this situation? And if not, why not?
Yes. Both the Maritime Transport Act and our bylaw allows for cost recovery. The challenge is that the vessels have to come out now. Yeah. So we end up incurring the costs, but yes, the mechanism is there to do that.
We don't seem to be using it, Chair. So that's my concern: is are we just saying, oh well, that's the ratepayer paying again, whereas we should be saying, let's act on behalf of all the ratepayers and recover this, and let's explore options.
We absolutely are. So the team tries to not incur the cost in the front end. They're trying to engage with the owner, get them to do the right thing, and then if costs are, then we go through the council cost recovery mechanisms that are available to us. But of course, if sometimes we don't even know who the owner is. The owner simply can't be identified, which is a big one. We've had an incident where the owner was deceased. So it's sometimes we're called out. We incur the costs, we get it out, we remove the risk, and we can't recover the costs. But if we can recover them, we absolutely will and do.
Just the way you were talking before, it seemed you were engaging with people who weren't dead. Obviously, you're engaging with them. And I wasn't clear on what options, and if they just say can't afford to pay, you just walk away and leave it, or you do some investigation, got assets, let's target them. So anyway, I've raised the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Thank you. I reading a paper and having heard about this several times, I do think that it's really good you're bringing it to us. I think that the current way isn't the most responsible way to be dealing with it as an organisation, actually, because we should be able to project more accurately what costs are coming this way, and to be more proactive is one way of doing that. Also noting, to be reactive is to really take the risk of spending the money inefficiently as well. When you show that escalation that can happen after thinking. So supportive of that. Obviously, absolutely hate the fact that other people are picking up the tab for a few people's choices, poor choices, and sometimes on purpose, sometimes by accident. But I suppose I would also like, and this is for the CEO and the chair and whoever else is around in future, I would like us to advocate even stronger to central government, hopefully even with the regional sector, to just get a bit more traction here about being able to, whether it's the registration of boats or whatever it might be, I'm not sure what it is, to just get some assistance to regional councils who all have to deal with this. Lastly, though, I would say there is definitely a piece there to find out how much people want to contribute to this kind of thing. So the annual plan process makes sense. But if there was to be something coming earlier to say, we have these 2, 3, 4, 5 high risk ones where the cost could really escalate before all of the timing of local government and your annual plans catch up, it would seem to make sense to make that request and see what happens, because there's no harm in doing so, right? But there is harm if it ends up in higher costs for everyone. Yeah, that's my feedback for now. And
Just on
if
that-
you could give an update on how we're going with the advocacy to central government, that'd be great. Thanks.
On that advocacy piece, and thanks for raising that, Jen, does that get discussed around the SIG or anything? Is there any?
It's a feature in the SIG constantly. So we've been raising it with Maritime New Zealand for actually a long time, and it hasn't really gathered a great deal of traction until this time. But Safer Boating Forum is another area that we're raising the issue and trying to put it on the agenda. But honestly, it hasn't gathered a lot of steam at this point. They see it as a regional.
Yeah, I'm keen to know how it could, because it's just been hanging around for so long, and there's a very large user pays kind of theme out there at the moment. So perhaps the time is soon.
Robbie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was actually brought up on Talkback about a week or two ago. Bay of Plenty Regional Council staff were on Talkback, and they actually looking at that it could cost up to $3 million a year to recover derelict boats out of the water. So it's a big issue around our whole coastline. The question I'd have is, the main issue is moored boats on moorings, yes or no?
A big portion of it, probably.
Yeah. So are they paying anything towards having moorings? Yes. So why isn't there a bond, or if we have to retrieve a boat, why aren't we selling them moorings, or if we can't recover costs? Or what's the issue there? Because they have the privilege of having a vessel in those locations, yet they're asking me to pay for it. And I got an issue with that, because I'd love to have that privilege. And that's a privilege they have. That's the bit that needs to be resolved.
We set the moorings price, didn't we? I don't remember. I remember us talking about the price of mooring.
These fees, but not related to derelicts attached to moorings. Yeah.
So there's fees for the mooring.
Yes. Yeah. They're individual resource consents currently.
Right.
There's annual fees that they charge, including maritime charges that cover some of our costs, but it doesn't contribute to wreck removal.
And could it? Could we add extra costs for having moorings? Because I think that's that will actually make people get those boats out of the water before we got to have some sort of mechanism to respond to this, and that's maybe one of them. Because they have a privilege. How many vessels are in the water in the Waikato region? Is there a number? You got the consent?
836.
Six. So that they have the privilege. What's our population here? 200. No, of the Waikato region.
Yeah, over
400,000. So you work it
Over
out. It's a
500,000.
very small part of the population that has the privilege of doing this.
Yeah, Warren's looking forward to having to advocate for increased mooring.
They're asking me to fund 600, maybe 600 or more $1,000 a year to take out derelict boats that only that small part of the population have the privilege to operate. And if you haven't got the money to operate your boat with that privilege, you shouldn't be there. That's my point.
Ben,
Oh, just pick up on that point. I wondered if you identify boats that are at risk, could we then impose a bond on them before they sink? So they're forced to do something with them or else. So there's a financial cost when you've identified a boat that's at risk. Could we devise a mechanism? Could we write one into a plan or something?
sorry, can I just get a microphone?
So I think fundamentally the question that you're posing is, should mooring holders be required to hold insurance should their boats sink and require removal? And that is something that I know Chris and other harbour masters around the country have been trying to advocate for some time, because, and it's the similar thing to what Jen was talking about before about attaching that to registration, because one of the challenges that you have with attaching charges to every single mooring holder is that you are equally exposing the 800 mooring holders who are doing absolutely the right thing to the costs because of the 20 or 30 who are not doing the right thing. And of course, that in itself has some challenges that, as councillors, you'll be familiar with, being charging everybody for the actions of the few. So if there was some mechanism that required all these parties to have appropriate insurance, then that would certainly go a long way to having a funding structure for when work is needed. But like I say, Chris and the harbour masters around the country been advocating for some time without success. If the councillors have got more influence than we have at staff level, that would be welcome.
I think it's something that we should escalate at regional sector group next triennium. You know, if Bay of Plenty Regional Council is out publicly talking about the significance of this matter, obviously you've got concern around our table. I assume that would be shared around the regional sector. So I think that I mean, that's something I'll certainly flag with regional sector group to make sure we get that onto the agenda to talk about, because I don't recall that we have ever talked about it at regional sector. So we'll just add that to the
Thanks,
list.
I'd appreciate that. That'd be great.
Just continuing, I don't think that this is an issue we can make a decision on today, given we're in the last days of the thing. It should come back as an annual plan. And personally, I would say it looks at a 0.4% rate increase at 500,000. It's not something I'd be advocating for. But I also wanted to defer to Graham. I think he had a comment.
Thank you. I think we need to look at who would benefit from having these cleaned up. And it's not just guys that own these boats. I think all boaties would benefit from the clearing of navigation, potential pollution, and even beach users. You know, I think you could get a sustainable revenue stream that would fund this. If you just look wide enough, you know, dogs, for example, dog owners don't pay the total cost of the registration for dogs. The wider community contribute to that because they benefit from not having unruly dogs. And I think the same has to happen here. You need to look at all potential beneficiaries and spread them the costs. And then you could afford to be proactive and addressing this appropriately. I don't think it's
Mm.
going to go away as boats age. There's going to be new ones coming in. I think we need to get a situation where we've got a sustainable income flow that we can address it and maintain it on an ongoing basis.
All right, Stu.
Generally support your option C. I suspect we need to run some sort of reserve like we do with pest control, so that some years you don't use all of it, other years you do. Not quite as generous as Graham with how we apportion costs, but because, as Robbie said, the average beach user will never ever be able to afford a boat. Sure, there's exceptions with people that buy old dungers, but they're the ones we're trying to deal with, And I'm not really convinced that trailer boats should have to contribute to this issue either, because there's a whole bunch of costs associated with running trailer boats. But nonetheless, that's all details we've got to sort out in the future.
Yeah.
We've got to go through a process, but that's kind of generally where I sit. Yeah.
Nice, but if we can, if the SIG can sort of turn their minds to the commentary that you're hearing, then I think we'd be well placed to put that in front of regional sector, because I really think it's not just a Waikato issue, right? And so if we can explore different models, then I suppose there can be advocacy at a national level to it. So, what do we got? Chris Hughes.
Chair, well, those that have never had the joy of owning a boat, you'll know there's an old saying that's a hole in the ocean in which you pour all your money. There is a reason why these wrecks are sitting around the place, because people cannot afford to do anything with them. And for us to go and try and charge them for something which they can't afford, it's not going to work. We're just wasting our time and wasting our money. I'm not saying we shouldn't make an effort to recover costs of removing them, but they're there for a reason, because people just simply cannot afford it. People are not generally destructive. 876 moorings works out about, over 3 years, about $200 a year for the per mooring for 550,000. As far as I'm concerned, it's a user pays, and you will find, my belief is that if you're hitting the people in the pocket who have the other moorings, there will be a self-enforcement process take place throughout the region, because boaties do not like to see other boats sitting around in neglected states. So I really feel that the industry or the boat owners themselves should be forced to self-regulate in any way. To do that is to hit them where it hurts. And most of these boats are very expensive items. $200 a year is not a lot of money extra for them to. That's my thoughts on the matter. But yeah, boats are an expensive item to own.
Just checking with Brent, if you wanted to, because I'm not seeing any other comments coming from councillors. Did you want to?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So there's a couple of reasons that we wanted to bring this today, because it's a significant risk that's happening around this region and others, and we were just concerned that we hadn't brought this before you. And so we wanted to make sure that you were fully aware of that risk. Absolutely, we wanted to get a bit of a steer about what should we be thinking about as we're coming forward to the next annual plan. And what I'm taking from this is that you'd like us to bring something which has some sort of strategic forward-looking focus, and acknowledging those affordability conversations. So it's not 500,000 per year, it's the 500,000 right now that we're aware of, and then it becomes a question of time. Is it something that you want to address over 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 years, those sorts of things? Because the longer you leave something, the greater the risk. And so the sooner you deal with an issue, the sooner the risk is dealt with. And we recognise there's a balance between risk and cost. And we just wanted to bring it to your attention so that we can have this conversation about what is the risk appetite within council. Because as Patrick said, we don't do one this year, then suddenly there's a $100,000 bill potentially that we have to do, and then we come back to the council and ask you for $100,000, and you say to us, well, why didn't you get in front of that risk, Brent? You should have got in front of it. It would have cost you $10,000 if you got in front of it. Why are you bringing us a $100,000 bill? So we want to have this open conversation. And the last part of it really is this current year. So we have the opportunity through the reforecasting process to come back to council to reforecast our current costs with a potential spend for the year. And whether or not there's appetite for the council having us come back with what would be the top few boats that we're really, really concerned about to deal with through the reforecasting process. The alternative being that we wait for one of them to sink and then we come back to you with a reforecasting process because a boat has sunk that we've had to deal with. We're trying to get a bit of a sense from the council around your risk appetite, because as it stands right now, our budgets don't enable us to remove any of these at-risk boats this year. What Patrick has mentioned before and in the report, we have a contracted services budget to deliver all of our maritime functions. Sometimes there's an opportunity where we have a few $1,000s here or there that we can work with a party to get a boat out, which is what we've been doing over the years. But our risk level has grown faster than we're able to deal with by tinkering around the edges. So that was kind of the purpose of being here today, to get a bit of a sense for whether or not you would like us to come back to you through the reforecasting process for this year. And I'm hearing very clearly come back to the council through the annual planning process for a longer term plan for how to address this risk.
So just for clarity, when you say this year, you're talking a financial year?
Yes, the financial year.
And the reforecasting process, when would that occur? If that was the desire of council, when would that occur?
So that would be when, I suppose, we've finished for this term, haven't we, Chris? In terms of finance and audit, it would be the first finance and audit committee of the next council, and so we would be coming to the next finance and audit committee.
Right. What I do want to give a steer there. Is there, obviously it's the next council, but is the feeling that a reforecasting paper coming to the Finance and Services Committee is the desire, or tie it into the annual planning process?
It's got to be annual plan.
Annual plan?
I think definitely annual plan, but what's the harm in bringing something to the new council early on, give them those choices? I mean, they might say no, they might say yes, but they've made a choice on risk.
I think both, because of the risk that other costs that could be incurred. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same. The first meeting of finance, I'd be happy to see a report and relative to, the worst case scenarios that you see at the moment, that the team sees at the moment. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right. So I think you got your direction there.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for both of those reports. Really interesting in a sort of uncomfortable way. But appreciate you bringing that before council, and let's get the SIG gearing up to bring it to regional sector A. Let's elevate that conversation. All right. Councillors, I just want to test with everybody. We still had 2 other items that were due to be workshopped today, but I just want to see what everybody's appetite is to. Okay, I think we're going to flag those 2. Or does somebody want to make a comment of how we might handle the matters?
No, Madam Chair, they were both workshops that councils requested. We are running out of days in the triennium. You've got all the information. I would ask with respect to the regional spatial planning, it was quite the topic of conversations at the 2 meetings we've had. So if you have any feedback on engagement and who we are to engage on, remember it's just feedback. We'll be going the next triennium to do that engagement. Please, can you flick it my way?
All right. So councillors, if you want to make a comment.
And sorry, Madam Chair, just talking through Warren. Also in respect to the state of the environment, that was something that I understand EPC was very passionate about it, will also be a document that will feed into the conversations for the next strategic direction around those roles and responsibilities that we have in regard to the state of the environment.
All right, very good. Yep. All of the slides, because these were public workshops, the slides will go onto the website. Oh, just. Yep. All right. We'll close the wait a minute, hang on, we need to do a karakia.
Onahia mai te uru tapanui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te hinanaro, i te ata takatu, koe rā e rongo, e whakaaria aki ke runga, kia tina, homie huie, tai kie.
All right, so we'll close the workshop at 1 p.m.